I would like to call the meeting to order and document the time as 6:35. And if you would stand with me and join me in the pledge.
Hey Brenda, we're gonna get started here.
So if you guys would join us in the pledge, I would appreciate it. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, welcome and thank you. Tori, if you would lead us through a mindfulness set.
All right, so we're gonna find a nice comfortable seat. We're all gonna arrive right here from where we've come from. So take a nice big inhale. Let your body rise up and then exhale and just settle in. Take another deep breath in and out. Breathing in, focus on being here now. Breathing out, absorbing and integrating all the things that have come before. And just find a nice regular breathing pattern. Feel your feet firmly on the ground, sitting firmly in a chair, right here. Breathe in here. Breathe out now. As Winooski School Board, we take this moment of intentional pause to remind ourselves what we're here for who, at what cost, and for what. Our in-breath of focus is on our community, stakeholders of the school, our families and our students and our faculty. And in your next round of inhale and exhale, we can come together to govern for the best of Winooski.
Okay, agenda review and adjustments. We do have one item here, a teacher nomination that came up, closed actually after the agenda was sent out. So we'll have paperwork. I'll add that to section 6D.
Awesome.
And, any other adjustments you guys
No.
had seen? Hey, Sean, anything else on your end?
Nope.
All right. Okay. So I think if I remember the annual agenda here, we have a focus on learning tonight with focus on ELL programs and the WIDA scale. We'll find out more about that in a minute. The other, I think this is also leading us into a series of focus on learning discussions that we'll have our liaisons, for the most part, come in and give us some background and some work there, and I think that's over the next 4 sessions?
I think 6.
6?
Yep.
Full
All
6?
year.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So, I think with those discussions, it might be worth communicating to the community to, you know, come and listen, or at least partake in the RETN replays. With that, I don't know, do you want to kick it off?
Yeah, I just want to introduce Kirsten Colgard, who is our Director of English Language Learning and Curriculum. So what you're hearing about is only a part of her leadership position. And just to remind people, I think that over the years, being a refugee resettlement city and the number of new Americans settling in our city, that we've developed a real high expertise in working with ELL students and their families, and have come to be known to have an excellent system that people come and learn about and take many of our practices and our models back to their own districts. And so it's a real source of pride for us, and we're lucky to have Kirsten and our dedicated ELL staff that just do a fantastic job day in and day out. So
Thanks. All right.
With that,
Okay. Great. All right. So when I was thinking about presenting, I was kind of thinking about it, with my teacher hat on, and thinking about what I wanted you to be able to walk away from this evening. And so something that we use in the SIOP model, which is sheltered instruction, and it's a protocol used with ELL students often, is students will be able to, or participants will be able to. It's a type of learning target, and the nice thing about it is it really focuses on what you can do at the end of this. So what I'm hoping you'll be able to do, what you'll walk away from, is you'll be able to explain the process a new American ELL student and their family goes through when they're resettled in Winooski. You should be able to name the different types of ELL services that exist in Winooski and describe the basic elements of WIDA testing and how we use the WIDA standards, okay? And there will be a quiz. So,
open book, I hope.
yeah. So to start off with, I wasn't going to spend too much time talking about the actual resettlement process, because I think when you get into the different cultural presentations, the liaisons can better speak to that and what that's like coming from a different country and coming to the U.S. But as you're probably aware, the resettlement process is long and hard to go through the whole process of being resettled in camps, fleeing from your country, and then waiting, and that whole process of going through background checks and to finally be resettled somewhere in the world, not necessarily the U.S. And then, so once families are here, Vermont Refugee Resettlement is our local NGO that works with those families to get them resettled. They typically find out a family's coming about 2 weeks before they arrive, so in that time they have to find housing, they have to find furniture, they have to find pots and pans, they have to find all of those things, and they have a group of volunteers that they work with that can help the family kind of get settled. But so in all of that, sometimes I get an email saying there's a new family coming to Winooski. Sometimes I get an email after they've arrived. Sometimes one of our liaisons hears about it, or sometimes another family who's already here says, my cousins are here. So we find out that families are here in a variety of ways, not always the same way. But once we find out they're here, the first thing we do is the families are contacted by one of our liaisons, and typically we almost always have a liaison who speaks the language of the family coming in, because right now the highest resettlement population are our Congolese families who speak Swahili and French typically, and then behind that we still have some Burmese and Bhutanese Nepali families, and then kind of a smattering of other languages. If we do ever have a family resettled with a language background that we don't have on staff, I use the on-call interpreters from ALB or VRRP and connect them with the families right off the bat. So we immediately get them in to fill out the registration packet and try and get all of that information about their students. And then we have our intake coordinator, who is Inga White, one of our high school ELL teachers. She does intake for the district as well. She sits down with the family and gives them the WIDA screener, which is a screener from WIDA, the consortium, and I'll talk a little more about WIDA soon. But she does that screener, and then that screener typically, if students don't speak a lot of English, it only takes them so far. So then we additionally have what we call a newcomer screener that gets into basic English language skills, the alphabet, basic school vocabulary, numeracy, commands, all of those like colors, those kind of pieces to see what students know. And then we also give the STAR math screener so that we can get an idea of math skills, which is really especially helpful at the middle high school. for placement. Because sometimes we have, English language learners who come in who might, be testing into our newcomer programs based on their English level, but they have higher math skills. They just don't have the language to go with it. So once we can get an understanding of their math skills, then we can place them appropriately. So once we kind of have all of that screener data, the intake coordinator works with the ELL teachers, guidance counselors, family liaisons, everybody kind of, sits down to figure out what the best placement is. And we base that first on age. So we try to place age-appropriate grade levels in elementary, middle, and high school. And then we look at language level and academic skill level. And then, once we figured out placement, if they'll be going into one of our newcomer programs or into the mainstream, they get a tour of the school, they get to meet their teachers, they get a welcome bag of school supplies to kind of get them started that they can take home, and then they start. So, a little bit about our ELL programs. So at JFK, we have 4 ELL teachers. Nancy DeVos does our newcomer program. And then we have Sarah Forbes at K1, Elizabeth Wood at 2-3, and Kristen Van Fossen at 4-5. And so we call the JFK program, is Nancy has coined it LEAP, which is Learning English with Academic Proficiency. So that's the newcomer program at JFK. And it's for newcomer students in grades 3 through 5. We'd originally had it at 2nd through 5th, but we found that the numbers of students, we had enough in 3rd through 5th grade. So we bumped it up to that after the first year, and we've still had a full class every year. So the LEAP students, they learn basic social and academic language, and they also learn, all the typical content that other elementary students are learning, working with the math curriculum, social studies, science, foundations, reading program, and then they also get, all of the unified arts, art, music, PE, guidance, and they get that in a sheltered environment that supports their English language needs, as well as their socio-emotional needs as they acclimate to the U.S. A big part of what our newcomer programs do is not just teach academic and social language, but teach the skills to be a part of the school. So if a lot of our students, the other term that you might have heard me mention before is SLIFE or SIFE, which is students with limited, interrupted, or no formal education. And so a lot of our students, because of the refugee experience, fit that profile of either having very little formal education or interrupted where, maybe they got through 2nd grade and then weren't in school for a few years and kind of in and out, or limited education in that, it's very typical, you'll hear the liaisons talk about in some of the camps, the typical classroom environment was outside, under a tree with very limited resources, and about the student-teacher ratio is typically about 1 to 80, in a lot of cases, 1 to 60. So in that kind of environment, I've heard, some of our liaisons talk about it. Unless you're highly motivated, you're not going to learn. You have to be really motivated to learn in that kind of environment because the teacher doesn't have the capacity to, engage with all of the students when you're looking at, 60 kids. So getting students, familiar with the skills that they need, the routines and everything is a really important part, and making them feel safe, because when they're coming in, needing, Sean talks a lot about wellness and how important that is in our school, making sure that we're meeting all students' basic needs, food, shelter, and then that sense of belonging and that sense of safety is really critical, and that's one thing that the newcomer program does right away is develop that sense of community. So this is Nancy DeVos newcomer classroom in JFK. And then, so we do have, we definitely have new students who come in who don't qualify for the newcomer programs because they have more language, they have more academic skills. And so they're placed into mainstream classrooms. We also don't have a newcomer program at K1-2, so all those students are mainstreamed. And their programs, they receive pull-out support, which is like pulling out in a small group to give students independent English instruction. Varying levels, if they're beginners versus intermediates, that looks differently, but it tends to support the curriculum that's going on in the classroom. And we use the Common Core standards, NGSS, and of course the WIDA standards, which I'll talk about a little bit later. And we also were trying to increase our model of co-teaching in the classrooms. And we actually, Monday and Tuesday, I was just at a co-teaching conference on best practices for co-teaching for ELLs. And I was able to take 8 teachers from JFK Middle School and High School, so that was great. And we really want to continue to expand that model because all of the research shows that it's really, once students have, reached like a low intermediate status, it's what's best for kids and what really helps kids move. And the data shows that it's not just what helps ELLs move, but all students. When they have 2 teachers in the classroom focusing on academic language, it helps all kids move. So we're really working on increasing that model, and that's happening at all levels of JFK, depending on scheduling and student need. And then we also use the Fountas and Pinnell Level Literacy Intervention program, which is a great reading intervention program that just really helps kids. And at this point, we're using it K through 12 with ELL and with mainstream students. It does a great job of helping kids who have plateaued in reading move forward. So then in the middle school, we have our newcomer program run by Jean Plass, and then we have our 2 ELL teachers. Sona Iyengar is on Team Journey, Andrea Whelan is on Team Nexus, and then we have Aftaba Mezatovic, who is our ELL program assistant. And so the Newcomer Academy at the middle school is really similar to what I talked about at the elementary school, but it's grades 6 through 8. It supports students, again, in social and academic language, all the content areas. And we're lucky enough to have the math and science classes co-taught by Jean, the ELL teacher, and a math and a science teacher. So that, because the thing is, ELL teachers are experts in English language acquisition. They're not experts in content. So being able to share that workload with content teachers just makes it a much richer experience for the kids. And students in the middle school participate in mainstream advisory, and they're also mainstream for arts rotation classes, and as I said, sometimes they're mainstream for more content classes based on math skills, based on reading skills. So in the middle school, it can be a little more of a hybrid program depending on what students need. And this is one of our new students this year. It was her first day of 7th grade, August 29th, 2018, and she just came to us this summer. And earlier this week, she saw her first snowfall, which was pretty exciting. The kids all went out on Monday. And here's a couple shots of students working with the Middle School Newcomer Academy, learning about geography down in the right-hand corner, and then doing a science observational science lesson out front. And so on the team, students who are not placed in the Newcomer Academy also receive small group support, and a lot of co-teaching is going on those teams with Andrea and Sona. They've really started to invest time, and because they're embedded on the team, and you all graciously supported us in hiring a 3rd ELL teacher in the middle school a few years ago. We hired Sona Iyengar, and she's been on Team Journey and has been really able to support those students and develop really strong collaborative relationships with the teachers on that team. Prior to that, it was Jean's newcomer program and Andrea trying to work with everyone else. And it was, it was a big feat. And she was pulling it off because she's amazing, but just barely. So now that they have, one ELL teacher for each team, it really has, deepened the supports that they can provide. And so at the high school, we have 4 ELL teachers, Nellie, and so it's broken down levels 1 through 6 here, because those are the WIDA levels. And so at the high school, when students are screened, we figure out kind of, what ELL class is most appropriate for them. They go into ELL class in place of like a mainstream humanities class. And then depending on their language level, they're mainstream for other content areas. So again, math, science, history, and a lot of those other content areas, some of them are co-taught by our ELL teachers and content teachers based on student need. And so that's great because even at the higher levels, like levels 5 and 6, you're seeing students who are bridging, who are almost exited ELLs. They're taking like government class or some of our DX capstones, and some of those classes are being co-taught by ELL teachers, so they're really able to support the academic language while the content teacher is developing the content skills. And so this was the beginning of the year, and the ELL newcomer class, students, doing the, you may have done this before or seen this before, the baking houses with marshmallows and spaghetti, and having to, do a writing activity, a descriptive writing activity about it. And so a couple other things I wanted to share about our programming is that we're able to do a lot more than just academics here. And summer programming is one of the most important things we do for our ELL students because, they come in having to develop both their English skills and their content skills, and they come in, usually having gaps compared to their grade level peers. So school vacations, summertime, we typically see regression with any students, but with our ELLs, we see a bigger, gap. During those times, so we need to have them in school year round, really. And most of those kids really want to come to school year round too. Like when we're, when we have vacations, have summer, they're like disappointed. They'd rather come to school, which is great. They're highly motivated, and their parents are highly motivated to have them here. So a couple of things we've been able to offer through our grant funding has been we've had the JFK ELL Newcomer Summer School, where we do an extra week just for our newcomer students every year. And so part of that is supporting reading and math skills intensively, but also providing some field trip opportunities so that students can go outside of Winooski and get to know Vermont and build that background knowledge that really helps support their understanding, so that when they come back here and they're learning about Vermont, the Green Mountain State, they've been to the mountains and they can, kind of visualize and understand what that is, or they've been on a ferry boat across the lake and they have a better understanding of what boats are and what the lake is, and just help develop their sense of community as well. I've got a couple pictures here from last summer. So this was at Sugarbush Resort. Every year for probably 7 years now, we've been able to get comps for the students to go down and spend a day. Full disclosure, my husband works there, so he has hooked that up. But they've been able to go down, take lift rides, do the zip line, do a bunch of other things, and just kind of explore the mountains. And I've gotten to go a couple times with them, and it's been so fun just to drive down with them, because a lot of them have never really left Winooski-Burlington area. So to go out into the country and see cows on the side of the road and all of that, they're pretty excited about it. And on the right there on the zip line, that's Dalib, like you all know. He's done it a few times before, so he's gotten very comfortable with it, so he likes to show off. The other summer program that we've been able to support at the middle high school for our ELL students is called Shadercroft, and it's a program that we contract with in the summers. It actually came out of the Champlain Valley School District is where it started as a tutoring and summer program for kids at risk. And I think 5 years ago when I came into this position, I had kind of heard about it, and I went to this open house to find out more. And talking with them, I was like, this sounds fantastic. Do you think you could work with ELL students? And they were like, sure, we can hire ELL teachers and we can figure it out. And the great thing about their work is that they focus on oral and written language. They don't do math, they just focus on language support over the summer, because that's what they feel like they do really well. So in the mornings, students are in different classes developing oral language skills and reading and writing skills, and it's all around student interest. And so in the afternoon, students go on what they call adventures. And some of those adventures are summer campy kind of things, going swimming up at Mallett's Bay, that kind of stuff. But then also each student has to plan at least one adventure based around their interest. And they have to call and schedule the appointment and plan, and the teachers support them with that. But so kids have done the most amazing things. They have gone to the Inn at Essex to learn about culinary and spent the day baking in that kitchen. They've gone to dance studios to learn more about dance. Students interested in cosmetology have gone to hair studios and learned about manicures and haircuts. And then last summer they actually 3 of our students got to fly. And I wish I had a picture of it, but I They get to go up in an airplane, and even, you know, take the wheel a little bit. And so that's just, they've just been able to do things and access things through that program that are amazing. And then all of their reading and writing is also structured around those activities. The teachers find, you know, reading activities that support that work, and then they do a lot of writing about their experiences. So it's a language experience approach to writing. And the students, what's great is in the fall, we always, the Shader Croft, the two people who run it, Hannah and Steve, come in and we do interviews and conversations with the kids about how they feel about school now and progress they've made, and they also keep a ton of other data on just, you know, reading data and how students have improved. And the kids are just, they're so much more confident, and you can see that in them, that like they've gained that sense of confidence and gained that sense that I am a student and I can learn. And it's been really phenomenal. One thing that we still need to work on is developing more programs for our high school students, because we just don't currently have enough to support our high school ELL students, because we're kind of capped at about 24 students in this program. And recently I had a student, you know, an adult student say to me, like, we need more to do in the summer. And I'm like, I know, I've got to figure it out. So that's like one of my priorities for this summer, is to, you know, find some more funds to really support more summer programming, because our students, you know, want and need things to do in the summer. All right, so now to the little bit drier part. WIDA. So are you all kind of familiar with that term? Alex is shaking his head no. Okay.
No.
So
You all know? You all like really
A
smart.
little bit. No, we've seen it before.
Okay.
yeah.
Has nothing to do with,
Retaining it.
nothing to do
Yeah.
with smart.
No, so WIDA is a consortium of, at this point, I think it's about 35 states have kind of connected around ELL assessment and standards. So WIDA was originally, it stood for like Wisconsin, Illinois, Delaware, and Alabama. Those were the 4 states that had originally got together to work on ELL standards. And then it kind of, as it expanded, they've changed the acronym a couple times. It doesn't really matter what it is now, but what it does is it provides the assessment that we give to students each year to ensure that they're making progress acquiring the English language. And they also have standards set around that teachers can use to differentiate and support their work in the classroom. So the different standards are all around the different types of language that you see in the classroom. So standard 1 is social language. You know, that's all of like the common language that we use when we're just socializing. Language on the playground, recess, playing games. Language arts, of course, and math, science, and social studies. And so in addition to those different content areas that the WIDA standards focus on, there's typically, when we talk about language, there's 4 language domains, and these 4 domains are tested in the WIDA access test. So listening and speaking are oral language, reading and writing are written. And 4 years ago, we went to, from WIDA used to be a paper and pencil test to an online test, which has always, you know, everything is shifting that way. But for language, that proves to be an interesting challenge, because so reading and writing obviously can be tested. Speaking is tested through, you know, that there is like, you know, a voice where students listen on the computer. And then the speaking has been the really tricky part. And this is where we've seen our scores suffer over the last 3 years, because so students now, they have to have a headset and they're listening to the computer prompts them, and then they have to hit a red button to record, and then they're supposed to respond, and then, you know, hit the red button again to finish the recording. And as you can imagine, a first grader, newcomer, who has not had a lot of experience with technology, does not do very well with that. And so we've had across the whole country, they've seen, you know, speaking scores lower overall. And I think just a big piece of that is to do with the technology. Previously, the speaking test was like a one-on-one test where, like, say I would sit with Mike and show pictures and ask questions and then score, you know, the teacher would score the student. And like we had to go through trainings and everything to make sure that that testing was done with fidelity. But now that it's changed to the purely online test, there's, definitely a lot of cons. Having trouble thinking of the pros, honestly. But it's just, so that's been one challenge. So teachers.
Is it just the scoring that's less, or is it the learning that's gone down as well?
Well, I think,
It's just not able to test the learning.
they're just not able to test the learning. It's just not, when they were originally going to this, we were part of the cognitive labs that sort of tested the test. And we had, they really did want to look at our newcomers as well. So they had people come in and work with our newcomers to like look at the speaking test. And I remember sitting there and being like, wow, like for kids that have only been here, for, even 4 or 5 months, they're still not comfortable with technology, and asking them to speak into a microphone, it's just not a very authentic use of language. Like talking to someone one-on-one is a much more authentic, assessment of language. But so we're kind of rethinking, that when we're teaching speaking, we're starting to think of how, using recording more in our classrooms, and thinking about how do we teach kids a little how to talk to the computer. Just because it's, it helps support them so that when they get to it that one time a year, they're not like completely confused. And because occasionally we have kids that just click through and refuse completely. And we want them to like feel comfortable with it and not feel scared or uncomfortable.
That's why I go back to a paper test.
Well, I don't think that's going to happen. I mean, I think that online testing in general, personally, from watching online testing over the last few years, I feel like when a kid is sitting with paper and pencil, it's a lot harder mentally for them to blow it off. Because you have a teacher there saying like, oh, you missed this, go back and look. But when they're on a computer, like for the SBACs, and they're scrolling through things, it's really easy to scroll and click and click and click, and I'm done. And we have kids every year that are done within, the first 15, 20 minutes on the SBAC, and we are allowed to, if I call the state, I can say can you reopen the test, and we can tell them go back and really try and think about it and read. But I mean, it's hard if kids are disengaged. I feel like it's easier for them to disengage with the computer. But I think that is the way of the world, and that's the way we're headed. So a little bit about language acquisition regarding the WIDA Access. So the WIDA Access is really testing the second one of these. The first there, BICS, is basic interpersonal communication skills. That will not be on the test. But all you have to remember is that that's social language, and social language typically takes 6 months to 2 years to develop. So that's that common language that you use when you're shopping, or talking to your friends, that very common social language kids tend to pick up very quickly. CALP, which is Cognitive Academic Language Proficiency, that is what the WIDA Access is testing. And that takes 5 to 7 years to really develop. And more recent research is saying that it can take even longer if students have not had prior schooling or had interrupted schooling like most of our students had, or don't have the support in their first language. Because we see it, and it's very, there's a lot of research that supports if a student has a strong first language and comes in with first language literacy skills, they acquire second language much more quickly because they have already learned to read in one language, so they don't have to learn to read. They have to apply the skills they've already learned to a new language. But when students don't have that, which is often the case when they've been in camps, it takes longer. So you're looking at more than 5 to 7 years for some students to access fully fluent access in academic language. So these are a couple of the tools we use with the WIDA standards. You can take a look at these if you want to take one and pass one around.
Ever seen one of these?
So these are called the WIDA Can-Do descriptors, and this is a tool that helps support teachers in the classroom. And it's for different grade levels, but when you look across level 1 to level 5, it's these are the language levels that a student might be at. And so at the beginning of the year, this is a handy copy that you can write on, and then wipe off. And all the teachers have one, and they can talk with the ELL teachers and say, okay, so where are my students at? So this is kind of where they're at in listening, speaking, reading, and writing. So this is an example of some things that they can do in class, and activities that I could expect from them, so that it's a good reminder for sometimes if a teacher is, developing activities in the classroom, to consider this on the fly, to just think about, like, is the activity I want to do going to be too complex linguistically for my kids, or too low, or right on the mark? And it's just a good reminder. It's a really handy tool. And these are the WIDA standards themselves. Again, they're level 1 to 5. And so what this shows is WIDA standards are a little different, because if you look at like the Common Core or the Next Generation Science Standards, you have, okay, in grade 1, students are supposed to be able to do this in reading and this in math. The WIDA standards are not like that, because language is so broad and so fluid, and language learners are at different places. So they have a lot of sample standards, but really when I've done after school classes for teachers, what I've tried to show teachers how to use these is that you take the samples and then you build your own standard. So you think about what you're teaching in class, like if you're doing a science unit or a math unit, what standards you're working on, and then you kind of figure out what you want students to be able to do, and then you break it down and differentiate it based on student language level. And so this is something that ELL teachers and classroom teachers can do together to break down. And it's impossible to do this for every single lesson or every single unit, but having practice with it a couple times a year helps teachers start to internalize that, so that they can be thinking about, all right, well, I've got a couple students who are at like level 2 in my class, but I've also got level 4s, and then I've got fluent speakers. What do I want them to be able to do, and what is my level 2 going to be able to do instead of my level 4? The important piece too, down here there's cognitive function, and so we're keeping the cognitive function high, like using higher order thinking skills while differentiating the language that's needed for that activity. Okay? And so the last thing that I wanted to say about the WIDA access scores was that the summer of 2016, there was a new standard setting, so in 2015-16, they implemented the online testing, and then in 2016-17, they changed the standards. So those 2 years of data were just moot. They were really just kind of a pilot. But now we're at a point where after this year, we'll have 3 years of consecutive data that's been used with the same standards. So we'll really be able to start looking at the WIDA access data again and drawing conclusions about it and seeing what it says about our programming and where we need to add supports. But we've kind of had to wait in that transition from paper and pencil to online to get to a point where we can start to really use that data. So the last thing I just wanted to talk about quickly was the next 6 months, you're going to get to see our liaisons every month to talk about their culture and their communities within Winooski. So what I really wanted to ask was, what do you want to know from them? So they're working on their presentations. They've done a lot of presentations for faculty and staff and community, but are there particular things that you're thinking would help you as board members to know more about?
Cultural adjustments.
Mm-hmm.
Just things that we should be careful about, that we're not culturally appropriating or those type of things. How do we make a student feel culturally welcome too here in this school district?
Mm-hmm.
Would be really helpful for me in terms of learning, so that I don't, do anything unintentionally or intentionally offend someone.
Mm-hmm.
And also just learning about the adjustments to Vermont,
Yeah.
and what are the things that we should be aware of as a school board in terms of like helping people be adjusting. How do we help make this a more welcoming community for our students and families?
One thing that I thought would be useful for all of you is if they could each talk a little bit about how education is different,
Yes.
from their home countries versus the U.S.
Definitely.
And family expectations.
Mm-hmm.
And how I know from a Chinese culture what the views of education, how that kind of blends
Yeah,
in.
absolutely.
For me, I think with each group, they bring a lot of different things with them, background, path here. But for each group, what is it that they struggle with in the district the most as a whole, not an individual person, but in general, what are the things they struggle with the most, both in school and in town, as they come in and acclimate?
I would want to know about sense of belonging and how the school can be, how is what is our welcoming level and sense of belonging for students that are new here, but also over time. You know, if they've been here for do they feel that this is their home and that deep sense of belonging? For students, I also wonder about parents' sense of belonging
Yeah.
in this institution, because this institution is a different setting, and I think even American parents don't always feel welcome in school, or feel nervous about talking that education language. So what is that impact on parents as well as students in terms of sense of belonging?
Great. All right. Yeah. So that was kind of some things that we had talked about, and that's as they're developing their presentations, I'll ask them to, share out on those points.
Do you mind if I open that same question to the public?
Yeah.
To hear what you would, I mean, ideally, these presentations are also for you all, and so.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Hold
I
on,
would love to hear.
I actually do have a question. It's not so much specifically that, but just out of curiosity, as I was listening to your presentation, I heard you mentioning a lot of things that sound like, really good conclusions you're drawing about just teaching in general. And I'm wondering if any of that transfers to the rest of the population in the school.
Absolutely. I think, a lot of ELL best practices are, support all students, and, like I feel like in ELL they're always coining a new phrase or a new acronym. But one that I've heard recently that kind of resonates with me is instead of ELL, which is English Language Learner, or EL, which is English Learner, the idea that we are all academic language learners, ALL, and that all students are learning academic language, that it's not just our students who speak another language at home, and that so many of the practices that ELL teachers use is to really develop students' academic language, and that really connects, for all students. I also think that a lot of the socio-emotional supports that we put into place for our ELL students, all students can benefit from as well. So yeah, there's a lot of overlap. And when I was talking about the co-teaching model, I think that really does support all kids, especially, our students living in poverty, our students, from different backgrounds, students, with special ed supports. I think that, yeah, there's a lot to
It's
be.
a nice opportunity.
Yeah.
Thank you. I would be curious to know families' approach to problem solving. Just generally speaking, how families go about approaching, how to solve problems within a family.
Like within resources and language barriers, or
More like disagreements between teenagers.
yeah. And so, we have tried to support that within the school as well. We have what's called parent meetups. One of our high school social workers works with our Bhutanese Nepali liaison to do parent meetups with the Bhutanese Nepali community, and they specifically talk about the challenges of raising adolescents that are living between two cultures, and they kind of get together and problem solve around those things exactly.
Thank you.
As a parent, I really have struggled with ways to connect with my kids' friends outside of school. Like texting doesn't seem to be the right thing because I don't get texted back. But I'm trying to support Jonah's relationship with his friends, and it's really hard to figure out how to get those kids to my house. So I don't know if I'm missing something or if there's some other way to connect, or I would love to hear about that just as a parent's perspective. Why it's so hard to get that, to connect those dots.
Yeah. And I think, I know Erica, all of the liaisons. I would say connect with them specifically because they can probably help kind of support that communication and also give you
That's a
some
good idea.
give you some ideas about how
Yeah.
to support that communication.
That's a really good idea, just to reach out.
One thing that I hear from all of our liaisons and all of our parents is how hard it is here. I was talking with Tool, our Bhutanese Nepali liaison today, and I'm really going off script here. Am I good with time, Sean? Okay. Tool, our Bhutanese Nepali liaison today was telling me there was another suicide in the community on Monday. And that's the 4th one in Vermont in the Bhutanese Nepali community. And the Bhutanese Nepali community in the U.S. has a much higher suicide rate. I forget the exact numbers, but it's much, much higher than the average population. And he was just expressing, you know, his frustration around that because, this is a person who seemed to be fine from all outside, observations. But there's a lot of, I think, a lot of our liaisons and parents will say that, where they're from, there was such a village mentality of you could go outside and talk to your neighbor. And it was mostly like walking communities kind of, so you could really like network and relate to people easier. Whereas here, they find a lot of, like when they try to talk to their neighbors, they don't necessarily want to talk to them. And then it's like everybody gets in their car and drives someplace. And so there's not that same sense of community, that same sense of the village. And I think for our New American community, sometimes that's really hard.
I think the other challenge, in adding to that challenge is, I think what Eric is speaking to too, is how do we find a cross connection of cross cultures?
Yeah.
That we, as parents, we're trying different things and we're coming from a white American perspective. So what perspective are we missing to be able to have friend groups and the village mentality of, even if we're not always hanging out or having dinner together, we can call each other when we need a ride here or there, or how do we support each other? How do we build those
Yeah.
relationships? Relationships and friendships are pretty tenuous in the Winooski School, in terms of kids seeing each other outside of school and how friends hang out or don't hang out, and so the school becomes the source of the friendship. As soon as you walk out of the building, it doesn't carry on outside of the building. So that's an interesting puzzle.
And I would just encourage you to really convey the questions to them and bring their answers back, because what I hear us doing is kind of trying to figure it out ourselves.
Yeah.
And we might be right about some of that stuff, but you also might be surprised at the answers, the information that we get when we ask them directly.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Great. Well, thank you.
Thank you so
Yes,
much.
thank you very much.
Thanks, Kirsten.
One thing I forgot to hand this out when I was talking about it. These are some of the Shadercroft journals from last summer, and these are extras that you can take. So this is some of the writing that the kids did based on those adventures.
Great.
All right.
The only other thing
Yep.
that I would like to mention, I was talking to Kirsten earlier about how do we get out into the community the work that is being done, this stuff at a real level, and how it's bringing kids through no language to having academic language. And some of the conversation was the reach in from communities out of state, looking in and asking questions about what we're doing. So I thought that was a real bonus to understanding that what we are doing is something special here. So we certainly appreciate that.
Thank you. Yeah, I was telling Mike there's a publication that's going to be highlighting bright spots in ELL practices in the Northeast, and we're going to be a part of that. So whenever it comes out, I will let you know and get you a copy.
And then a recent reach in from the U Texas, Austin?
San Antonio.
San Antonio.
Yeah.
So, even from Texas, they had Vermont roots, but they're understanding that there's something here, so.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Nice to see everybody, and I will see you in 2 weeks.
Yes.
That's right. Budget.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, keep your wish list up.
Yeah, I'll have some numbers for you.
Okay,
Thanks.
Thank
Great.
you.
all right, moving on into public comments.
Should I stand?
Actually, right on the corner there, I think is probably the best for, yeah, that's good.
Okay.
I think everybody can see you there.
All right. Thanks for having me here tonight. My name is Infinite Pleasure for the public. I'm here tonight on behalf of Parents and Youth for Change, just to share some updates on our work in the past year and the year coming forward. For those of you who are unfamiliar with Parents to Youth, work of Parents to Youth for Change, for 5.5 years now, we've been building relationships both in the Burlington and Winooski school districts with families, low-income households and immigrant households. We've also been trying to take advantage of leadership opportunities to build leadership within those communities. We organize for changes that families feel are most important to them, and that will improve outcomes for large numbers of students. In Winooski, the bus pilot being one of those projects. And that was actually something that we imagined would be a place where some community building could happen outside of the school. But of course, it's early in that we just had our first pilot, and the second pilot's coming up. We are also committed to educating multiple different communities throughout Winooski and Burlington by sharing our learning and welcoming feedback. An example of that is how we lean in with our listening campaign. We're doing that now here in Winooski. And another example of that is right now we're learning about the Every Student Succeed Act and Title I and how that works in the public school districts. And so we'll be sharing our learning about that across both communities. And so just to give you a couple of updates, we have some new staff. Christine and Erica just joined our team. Both are pretty grounded in the Burlington community and in the Winooski community. We're really excited about that. We created a new advisory board that meets quarterly, and so now I have someone to be accountable to, which is kind of special. And we now have an MOU with the Nellie Mae Education Foundation, which is active until December of 2019. And so we have a full year of funding for our project here. So with PYC continuing to work with families in the Burlington and Winooski schools, we thought it was worthwhile to have some clear expectations about our role, the role and scope of our work in the districts. So as a practical matter, I reached out to several different stakeholders around looking at new memorandum of understanding between the Burlington PYC and the Burlington schools and the Winooski schools. Now that the Nellie Mae Education Foundation is no longer in the picture, we saw value in maybe trying to create a new MOU with both the Winooski schools and the Burlington schools. And so we sought out some assistance with that by Champlain College professor and design thinking course. And so we had a group of students look at the old MOU and work on some, I guess, a draft of what an MOU might look like. And so here's an executive summary of that report that was done by those Champlain College students. And they have a whole presentation on that. If you are interested in hearing directly from these Champlain College students, they're eager to share their learning. They're welcome, come in and present to you folks. After years of really hard work on the part of parents in the Winooski community, we're delighted to see that the winter transportation pilot in the first year was a success. We heard from many families that it made a big difference for them. And so in the next couple of weeks, PYC is going to continue to support some of the necessary work that needs to happen so that this coming winter pilot can be as successful as the last one. And this includes a collaboration with another Champlain College professor a data analytics expert, Dr. Noreen Hall, who has agreed to assist us in analyzing multiple data sets to determine whether the pilot is making a difference in the lives of families in Winooski. So she just needs some data. And we also have some administrators on the Burlington side that have agreed to share some of its data with us so that we can have they can have a large data set to look at to make some determination of whether it's making a difference or not. So also, after years of working alongside these families, we've become aware of the fact that the issue of transportation was just the tip of the iceberg. So we're continuing to have a listening campaign. We're just knocking on doors, meeting folks, out in Elm Street neighborhood, setting up meetings, dinner, house meetings. And so we continue to do that work. We also continue to do that work on the Burlington side. And lastly, included in our work plan, as I brought up earlier, we're going to be educating parents about Title I funding and the Every Student Succeeds Act and the benefits of being involved in those decision-making processes. So we are learning up on that stuff ourselves, and we plan to bring our learning into the community so that more folks can understand the benefits of being involved in the decision-making processes around Title I funding. So that's my update for today.
All right.
If anyone has
Great.
any questions?
Thank you.
Thank
A lot of good work, a lot of tough work getting out into the community, so appreciate that. All right,
It's great work.
anything? All right, moving on, consent agenda. I would accept a motion to accept the consent agenda.
So moved.
Any comments, discussion?
Well, there was a lot of great things in the superintendent report.
Yes.
I mean, there's so many celebrations. So we do have this on the website, right?
Yes.
Yes. Do
Yes,
they have
they're
links to the things that you link in? Like the here, I am from here video? And
I think so. But
Okay.
I can check that
right,
to
see
make
if
sure
anyone's
because I
checking
give
it. I just
Sandy
wanted
2
to shout out
copies.
that reading
Yeah.
that superintendent report really gives this really great overview of what the goals are and some of the great successes that are actually happening in the building.
But
One thing I wanted to point out was with the middle school that there is a new push around the advisory around middle school. And when we did the community conversations with the middle schoolers, one thing that they were talking about was about struggling with relationships. And this new push is addressing simultaneously, addressing some of the concerns that the middle school students, were having
Good.
in terms of things that they wanted to change. And there's a lot of awards going out to like Nan Johnson, some of our teachers.
yes, those are,
There's
pretty
another one.
amazing.
There's Najib
Najib. Yeah.
with our great soccer team having such a great year, great season. And there was another, Masidi, yep, and she won a Champlain Valley Office Economic, got
And
recognized.
Heidi, the high school guidance counselor.
There you go, right. So just a lot of great stuff that's in
Mm-hmm.
here in terms of celebrations and points of pride in our school district.
based on your comments each month, you definitely get into the details of what's going on. Is it worth, and would you have any concern, Sean, about potentially dropping a link of that on like Front Porch Forum each month?
No.
Just to give, I think one of the
Of
things
the
that.
report itself?
Just the report
Or just
itself.
the highlights of it?
Or just the report itself.
If they want,
I think there's a lot in there that people would be amazed to see the things that are going on. I mean, we can find a way to do that to.
Right.
Well, no, I can build it into the system and just have Sandy do it. I won't be-
right.
I mean, does that,
No, it works fine. A lot of great things, but maybe like if you break it up into different parts, you don't dump it all at once. Like
Right.
once a week, you just do the first half of your how are we doing achieving the things, and then the second week, and then the third week it's different because it is a really good report. And
It's
then
great.
and I think it would also
Yeah.
help start socializing people to understand what is our ends mission.
Right.
statement.
Well, that's, and I guess
Yeah,
that would be
like
my
just drop
question
it
about
in-
breaking it up rather than
Right.
keeping it all together with each section lining up to something that we,
See, part of it is when I read the
Fine.
Front Porch Forum, I really enjoyed the fact that it's the short messages.
Yeah.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
you need to like
I
move through
I
it.
pretty go through it. Like I enjoy one at the end of the day, and I know I'm gonna read it in 5 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And I gotta admit, like, there's a lot. Like, when you throw in a 30-minute link,
Yeah.
that I am here, and then I'm scrolling on my phone, I'm probably not gonna get back to it
Right, right.
later on if I know and stuff. I mean, once again, I wish we had a public
Yeah.
that stayed here, but I would ask my public, like, when you read Front Porch Forum, what's the average amount of time that you spend on it?
Mm-hmm.
I guarantee you, it's probably 5 minutes.
Yep.
yeah.
You know?
Mm-hmm. So in 5-minute bites.
Yeah.
If you can.
Yeah, I'm
kinda-
thinking, yeah, like this, yeah, you know, WSD highlights kind of thing.
Yeah, because these
with
are highlights.
Just a couple of those
Yes.
bulleted, like, things that you highlighted and pull them out and do them weekly or something.
Right.
Yep.
Because even just like goal 1, boom, that's one
Yeah.
week. You know, goal 2, that's another week. You know, it could be something, because I think it also, I like the idea of sort of acclimating our community to what our goals are
Right.
and how we're actually meeting them. Because you
Yeah.
read through it
Yeah.
like, God, there's a lot of great stuff going on here.
You may also hear about a communications media relations person in the upcoming month.
Oh, I'd love to hear about that. Yeah, the promotion of the good work that's actually happening. You know, just it's relevant, it's meaningful, and it is happening in these buildings. Like
Yep.
that is good news stories.
Yes, to keep the dialogue moving
Mm-hmm.
forward of the good things that are.
Because
going
even this bar grant is important for people to know
Mhm.
on.
what's
Yes.
happening.
Yeah,
That's,
that's a
Yeah.
big deal.
that's
It is a big deal.
fabulous.
Right.
Yeah, and it would be interesting because the I Am Here video, which people should see here in Winooski and
We're
certainly
going to
throughout
do a
Vermont.
public showing of it.
Oh, good.
We're trying to arrange for that now. We're looking at January.
Okay.
Yep.
That was great. To end on Winooski. Like
Yeah.
at the end, it just, whew, here we
do
were.
have like follow-up questions on that, like in the sense of hearing our soccer players or athletics going into other places.
Yeah.
To have bananas thrown
Mhm.
in. How do we hold other communities I mean, is there a mechanism that holds, or
There
do
is.
they tell? And what is it that we're doing? And also kind of building a campaign on what we make sure we don't do
Right.
Yes.
to others. Because that's the thing that got to me in watching the I Am Here video was
Mhm.
the suggestion that there was like, do a 10-year plan on diversity.
Mm.
Right.
Mm.
And so if we're gonna show a video in
Mhm.
January, I also don't want that to be a hollow thing for
Right.
us.
Right.
So how does
What
us
are our-
as a
what's our
school
plan?
board
Yeah.
hold us accountable, hold
Mhm.
the school district accountable that, it's great that we're in these videos,
Yeah.
but let's practice what we're preaching here.
I think there are some things going on that I would hold up as practicing what we're preaching, particularly, embarking on implicit bias training for our staff.
Mm.
And for me, that's been, as we look at professional development over the long term, we've started with some other things and worked through those the last couple of years, and it's always hard because you have a list of 8 things,
Yeah.
and you don't want to do, 4 or 5 of them and not do them well.
Right.
So you end up prioritizing, and I think now we're finally getting to the point where, and that's really foundational
Mm-hmm.
for the adults who are working with our kids every day to reflect on their own biases and do some work on that. So I think that's a really important starting point for us right now.
And I think just highlighting
Yeah.
that. After,
Yeah.
I want you to do the video showing, saying, like, this is what we're doing
Mm-hmm.
to uphold our bargain.
Right.
And I think that's just a wonderful statement.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a great.
The boys were fantastic, weren't they? Abdi Salan. and-
Yeah, they
and
were.
Abdi.
They were.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All the kids from all
Yeah.
over the state. Yeah.
It was disheartening to hear that they are experiencing that from teams. As I was watching the Hazen game, I was standing next to Hazen parents, and the assumptions they were making about who we were as a team, about what was happening on the field, was just skating this line of, well, it was bias. It was it was explicit bias. And it's hard to hear it, to be right up next against it, and then realizing they're getting it even more explicitly tossed and pointed at them is really hard to reckon with. And then, so how do we address that? And what do we as a community do? And
Right.
it's nice that one, not responding in some ways, but it's an interesting lens to look at it
Right,
in terms of what our sports teams are up against when we go
right.
and compete on other fields and when they
And-
come
and
to
we've
our
had some of
fields.
those situations, whether
Yes.
it's been, a female student athlete and Hajib, and the way that gets treated by fans, other players,
Officials.
officials, and so I always look at that in kind of a multiple approach, right? We are protecting our kids,
Right.
number one, and making sure that they feel safe and respected when something like that happens. And then we're also trying to educate other people, because that's a real opportunity
That's
for
the
us.
line, yeah.
So with officials and the Hajib incident, like we had an opportunity to go and talk to the VPA and work with their, coordinator and give them the messaging so that they could work with officials and talk about it and make it personal, because for many of them, it was inexperience and they just didn't know,
Right, right.
So go all
And
way
the
to
difference between
education.
intention and impact.
Yeah.
Right? What was the intention? A lot of it is just not knowing, is that blindness, right?
Right.
Fans, sometimes people just get fiery, right?
Right.
And want to win. And
Games,
so they
yeah.
start saying things, and that is still maybe not but the impact is still real.
Right. Absolutely.
I mean, that was a statement by one of by the professor in there that said, like, I don't care about intention anymore.
Right,
Right.
right.
It's about impact.
It's about impact.
And if you're wondering why we're not
Rebecca
moving the
has it,
dial on it,
Yeah.
I mean, in this day and age, I'm hoping that there's, I appreciate people's intentions, and I think there has to be
Yeah.
a realm of forgiveness on people's intentions, but there's also like,
Well, the forgiveness can be, well, let's learn.
let's learn. but,
Because
like,
the intention just washes away the impact. And I feel like we want to make sure that our students feel supported in the impact that they feel versus focusing on, well, it's just a sports game, people get a little out, No, the
Yeah.
impact is harsh.
No,
Don't minimize
sportsmanship.
it.
Yeah.
That's
we
what
can't- we-
happens
Yeah.
by majority culture all the time, is
Right.
minimizing.
Minimizing, yeah,
Right.
and washing it away.
I do want to. It was an interesting video, and the only thing that's always irks me when we talk about diversity, it seems to be a black and white issue. And in a community like ours, where diversity is really well rounded in many shapes and forms, I just want to make sure that I acknowledge that our Asian students and our Latino students who are part of our school district here that we see them too at this moment. Right? And so when we do these videos, I just want to make sure that we know. And that's all I'm going to say is that I see.
No, that's
And,
fair.
and class too.
Class.
Is a huge one.
The part of the experience that I had on the field is classism was just as, the bias about classism was just as about race as well. They're hand in hand.
Right.
Yeah. And we've experienced classism here, even at this table. It made me think about the Black Lives Matter flag. And I'm glad that you brought it up in terms of all the color that we have in our building and how to promote that. Like, that's an interesting conversation that we see and hear all.
The all lives matter.
Yeah, the all, and maybe the all are welcome. All lives. Well,
You gotta be careful.
but-
with the,
but the all lives, because it's like when Black lives and people of color lives matter, then all lives matter.
Right.
I mean, that's an important distinction between that.
Right.
But I feel like I hear you on the that video too, and being from the South, it was black and white, and there's so much more color in that.
Yes.
Not just
Totally.
so. Okay.
All right. I have a motion to accept. All those in favor, aye.
Hi.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. On to section 6, budget timetable.
So you have the document that was included. We will be emailing out the baseline on Monday, the 26th, in preparation for the first meeting on the 28th. And then you can see the presentations as we go down. 28th is first, beginning with the ends, and we look at special education, ELL, operations, IT, and those things, similar to what we've done in the past. And then we meet every Wednesday, or as needed, to continue to revise. The one thing that we've already been warned about is that those revenue, 3-year comparison, equalized pupil, those state numbers that we need to make an accurate forecast of tax impact will probably be later than normal.
Later than they have been
Later
late.
than normal?
Yeah. So
Because wasn't that always like January, in the beginning of
They're already
January
done.
they'd show up?
Yeah, it could
Right
be.
At the end.
It could be.
We're always wrestling with that just to get this thing
Right.
off to the printer, so
Right.
it sounds like we're gonna miss that too.
Well, it could
Well,
be.
it's gonna be
Yeah.
tight to
It's
that
gonna be
deadline.
tighter than normal,
Okay.
I think, based on what they're telling us though. So in terms of,
Okay.
the
That-
one thing I see is December 12th, which is a regular board meeting, and then there's budget work in there, is we may not have a lot of work to do on budget if we don't have those numbers, because, you know, that's when we really start getting into revenue and
Right,
everything else. So
okay.
Rebecca and I will keep you apprised, and we'll adjust
Primary,
as
prim-
needed.
Yep, primary focus then is cost, because that's what we can control.
Right, right.
To the first order.
Yep.
I will be, actually in California on Wednesday, the 28th for the first meeting. I don't want to miss that. 6:30?
6:30?
Okay.
Yep.
So that'll be 3:30, and our, the meeting that I'm going out there for ends at, I believe, noon Pacific. So I would love to try to get in remotely.
Hope you-
I'm
yeah, we can
pretty
type
sure
it
that
in.
I can use the higher speed internet connection to do that, because the last time it was poor and didn't work, because
Yeah.
It
I
didn't,
don't want to
right.
miss that first one, so.
Okay, we'll figure
We'll
that
talk
out.
about, how we can, set that up and, make it work.
Yep.
It's not the one I wanna miss. All right, other than that, we'll, do it like we always do,
Mhm.
what we need to do, when we need to do it, and get it done and passed. All right. With that understanding, then, on to, section B here is the monitoring report for emergency superintendent succession.
That's so
All-
thorough.
Always hope you never need it, but
But
when
if
you
we
do,
do, this a procedure to follow.
and I think this is one of the probably 3 or 4 of these policies that I think has helped, because this is not something you think about to this level if you don't have this. So,
The degree of clarity in this allows us to feel safe about this district.
good,
So thank you for that. That is,
Yes,
it is
I-
incredibly thorough.
very
The,
much.
the only change of note is on page 2 in section 2, where we've added the human resources coordinator.
Mhm.
So that gives
Nice.
us a little bit more capacity to
Yeah.
manage
Broader
things in
cover.
this eventuality, so, yeah.
So if you ever want to make a test run, go on vacation during the school year for a week.
Don't tell
and-
anyone. Just
Don't tell anyone. we'll keep it a secret among
Right,
us.
exactly. You don't have to ask twice.
School board. Well, we deserve it, Sean. So, but it might be a fun test run
Yeah.
just to see what would happen if you went on vacation.
Yeah, but it's all laid out to the point where at least we know who we go to. They bring
Right.
it to us
Mhm.
too,
Yeah.
so I appreciate the effort there.
Yep.
So, given that, then, we're in the discuss and approve cycle here, so I would accept a motion to accept the policy 2.5 superintendent monitoring report.
So moved.
Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
And again, just as a reminder, as we go through the year, we've now got all 8 of these, so these are our review as we go through the year for our final view. So, thank you for digging in deep. All right, community engagement plan, under asset protection, capital project.
So in your packet, you had a draft of the plan, which will continue to evolve. I built the plan with the help of David Epstein from Truex Collins. He's used kind of this broad outline with past projects. And then I have also met with some local experts in the communications area who took a look at it and gave us some feedback on it. Shared it with the capital project committee last night at our monthly meeting and got some feedback as well. One of the recent additions would be that we are going to contract with Image Associates, who we have worked with on a number of things. They've produced the videos on our website, they've updated our website, they've worked with the board to develop communications plan, and did our logo work for us. So they know us really, really well. They're passionate about Winooski. And so they'll be coming in December. and doing interviews with a variety of stakeholders so that they can develop the messaging package, and also some videos. Part of the contract is to do a 3 to 5 minute kind of lengthier video about the project, and then do a couple 2 to 3 short 30-second spots that can be used through all of those different outlets that are listed there. So we are, I think, a little bit pressed for time on this timeline. If you look on the second page, we'll be working diligently this month and next month to really develop the content and get all of that messaging and everything going. And then in January, and we're looking at trying to get the budget adopted by you all before we move into this next stage. And then we would like to do one community forum and a few tours towards the end of January, and then kind of leave February aside from maybe doing some social media, newsletter types of things in order to stay focused on the budget in February up until town meeting day, and then go back to really working on this more substantially in March after the budget hopefully passes. And really March and April will be really key in that community engagement with a slated bond vote for early May. So one of the pieces in there that will happen in terms of a warning timeline is that an amount would need to be approved by the board to put on the warning, and that has to be done ahead of time, probably late March.
Okay.
So the thinking is we'll have at least 2 community engagement forums, so we'll have some material from those that we can the committee can look at. We can come back and talk to the board, and it may require a special meeting later in March, early April to make that decision for the warning.
Okay, and from the data that we had seen previously and the totals that we had seen, we were going to work with the committee to see what can be done to round some of that out, or
Yep, continuing to work on that.
sharpen it down.
Yep.
All right, good. Any,
Any questions on that one?
Looks good.
all right. Okay. Then we had added the teacher nomination in 6D. This one's here is a little bit different, so Sean, if you want to just a brief overview.
Right, so every year we are allotted a certain number of funds through our Consolidated Federal Programs grant, and we don't always know how much that will be until later in the summer, and then we don't always know what will be approved until even later than that. So recently we feel that we have the room within that budget that we could increase an existing literacy coach in the elementary from half-time to full-time for the remainder of this year. It is only a contract that is good for the remainder of this year. Then we're able to reassess whether or not we would believe we'll have the funds to continue at that FTE or return to the 0.5 next year. So the job was posted internally and externally, and Jody is a known quantity and excellent at what she does, and so we're really excited that she's willing to, move into that full-time role for the remainder of the year.
Great.
And
Do we need to vote on
one,
that?
we have to approve that because we would normally do it through the consent, but we decided to keep it out on this one. So I would accept a motion to accept the teacher nomination as presented.
So moved.
Okay, any other discussion?
I'm just gonna rotate.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Yep. And then we move down into 7, the student report to the board. Our students are tied up with other items tonight, so we will move on. The
All right.
report on the VSBA annual meeting was intended to be simply a verbal, but I'd like to
That would be
understand.
me. Sean was there for a little bit.
I
He's
was there
doing
for
his
a
own
little
version.
bit, yeah.
It's funny because I just saw that, and I one thing that was really I don't know, thought-provoking was, I forget his name, Paul Reveal. Oh, maybe my notes were here. Anyway, and it's from Harvard's, has an education redesign lab called By All Means. And the data that he threw up was being able to look at achievement gaps through a lens of, here are all the changes we've gone through in education since education reform back in the 50s, and the achievement gap, but that you can actually look at data to say neighborhood by neighborhood of how achievement's going to work. So you can do it by neighborhoods, you can do it by socioeconomic status, you can do it, but by and large, the meter hasn't really shifted much in how we're being able to close the gap from students being raised in low-income families to those that are being raised in more economically fabulous families. So that was it was an interesting lens to realize that I think what they really came down to was schools can't do it all. That schools need to be the center within a community, and how we're reaching out in the community. The community is involved in this also, because it affects all of us. It's not just the scores within our building. It is, how are we putting all students out to live healthy, successful, and productive lives, meaning that we've got to address all kinds of variables that feed into why students aren't available for learning at certain times in their lives, and what that's about. So it was interesting also to have this presentation kind of happening with the capital project, is recognizing that the school building really does need to be able to be designed so that other community can come in and out, and we're all a part of this problem solving and promotion of our own humanity so that we all sort of grow and expand ourselves from where we're starting. And I think there was a point of pride in the fact that there's a healthcare system here, that we do have our in-house healthcare thing going on. But it's something for us to dive into, I think, to really, and I know from your lens, community matters because we are creating pathways for kids to learn outside of this building. And the flexible pathways is really growing. That ability to grow community, a sense of community within this school in terms of advisories and relationships, can also bleed out of this school too. And how do we go and do that and find ourselves within this community? I also saw in the superintendent report also that it seemed like middle school students are doing interviews to promote a positive narrative about Winooski. So we're kind of all headed in that direction, and this to me sort of just kind of hit it home around, this building needs to be accessible for community coming in and us going out to community,
Center
because we
point.
can't do this alone
Right.
in terms of achievement gap. Kids are showing up in preschool with 30 to 80,000 less words in their toolbox than other kids. So it's out of the gate. And I think that also us having free preschool, hopefully continuing to expand that, so that kids, that we, so
It's a really complicated thing.
it's very complicated, and hopefully we're as a nation backing out of the school is failing, because I think again what I'll wrap back around to in terms of what happened with Colchester here is when people say a school is failing, they're saying the human beings inside the building, which are the students, are failing. They're not. We like to point it on the teachers, but it's actually the human beings inside the building, the families that are a part of that school system, and where
Well-
they are starting from. We don't say it explicitly.
Well, but I would argue that it's society that is
Yeah,
failing
yeah,
as a part of that, because and that's where it gets really complicated, because we're talking about complex societal change, which has a lot of those elements that you're talking about: food security and
Right.
housing and safety
and complex
and
societal oppression.
economic development
Yeah.
and all those things.
Yeah. Yeah. So it was both heavy, but it was also hopeful. And right, we getting back out to the community, that it isn't just about what's happening inside this building, doing it alone and being isolated
Right.
inside these buildings and inside these classrooms.
Yeah.
There's a bigger picture.
Yeah.
So it's good.
Yeah.
It was inspiring and daunting.
Right, but if it was
Right.
easy,
Right, we would have figured it out a long
Done.
time ago, right?
we wouldn't be here.
Yeah.
I said,
So-
though, that y'all do amazing, you know, when you talk about the school being the center and all that. And it's amazing how much we put so much pressure on our school districts to do it. But, you know, when the student only really spends 35 hours out of 168 hours a week, and the safety that we provide is kind of amazing on the resources that are provided. And I think the movement forward with the new capital planning project is really, you know, you've heard me emphasize that the school is the way that we can draw the community even more to be part of the village and stuff. And so, I just want, like, more on record, and like, you know, 35 hours, folks, out of a 168 hour week. Let's just do the math there. You know, like,
Right.
that's a lot of pressure for y'all to solve all of our issues.
Yeah, and you know, I think from like a teacher perspective, the more kind of support you know, teachers could get from the community and other organizations, you know, that would feel great and feel really helpful. You know, because I mean, for example, just the work that was done around food security and early learning, you know, we see our elementary teachers seeing a difference in kids already. You know, and so that comes not just from the school, that comes from a lot of different people and organizations, you know, doing a lot of hard work to move that.
Right. That's just to get started,
Yeah.
from the starting point.
That's right.
Now, you know, sustaining it and,
Growing and growing it, sustaining and growing.
Right.
Yeah. And I think also our relationship with the city, you know, with our MOUs with the city and how we're all working together, seeing us all as a part of, we're all a part of the city and we can all work together.
It-
That's a wonderful
Yep.
relationship. Yeah.
Good. Well, thank you for that, and thank you for
You're welcome.
attending and
Yeah.
Yeah, that was
being
good.
one thing I miss for sure during the year. I look forward to that. All right. A charter committee request on non-citizen voting. So, Eric, I know you're part of that discussion. I don't know if you want to join and join us here.
Come have a seat.
Here's fine. Yeah.
I thought the mayor was going to be here tonight too. He got wrapped up.
So in your packet, you really had the, yeah, I mean, the third page was something that I had put together, and then this came in, which was more official, I think, was really the memo that came
Oh, okay.
out of the council meeting that broke out the charter for the committee. And so in essence, what they're looking for is 2 school board members to be a part of that.
Well, look, there's 2 of us here.
And I
You said
guess-
there's 3 of us here.
And I guess what I didn't necessarily see, though, is just a quick overview on the impact to the school charter. Is it because you have local, non-registered voters?
Do you want
Voting?
to take a stab at that one, Eric?
So currently, I mean, this is a direction the council is interested in looking at, but there's no specific shape of what that takes, and that's kind of the charge of this charter committee. So to back up, the history was that the council was looking at putting forward a charter change before Winooski voters that would enable all residents, what we're calling them, but enable non-citizens to vote in local municipal elections. Montpelier actually just on the November ballot passed something that was similar but a little bit different. It was similar in concept but a little bit different in execution than what we were looking at the council level. What I want to say before diving into some of the specifics there, I was one of the advocates in moving that forward. It was a huge oversight on my part. I know I reached out to some of you individually in regards to opinion on the actual concept, but it was a huge oversight on my part to not reach out in a more formal way and involve you all in that discussion as we were having those discussions on moving it to a November ballot item. So I want to really sincerely apologize for that. But in us deciding not to move it forward for a November ballot item and to instead go the route of establishing a charter change committee that will look at opportunities to move this forward and what shape that might take, as well as define its own timeline, it's an opportunity to take that step back and really engage the school board in a formal way. So the council felt really strongly that since this is something that does impact so many different facets of our community and so many different members of our community, we thought that, representatives from the school board on the committee makes a lot of sense from a logistical and representative perspective. Will lead to a much better policy outcome, and also had thought that you all would likely be interested in being a part of those discussions. So that's kind of where we're at. We put together a draft charge for the committee, which is what you see in front of you. If I'm remembering correctly, I don't think the council has voted to formally adopt that that draft. I think that we'll be voting on that at our upcoming special council meeting, but I'd have to check back with Seth on that. And that does, lay out membership as well as scope. It's really similar to design of past commissions or committees that have been established by the council prior. It is my understanding, though, that right now the Winooski School District Charter does point to voter eligibility requirements in the Winooski Municipal Charter. So there is a direct relation if the Winooski Municipal Charter is reestablishing voter eligibility criteria for municipal items. The way it's currently structured, that would also impact school board and school bond issue questions as well that are put before voters.
All right. And were we looking tonight for 2 names to be on this committee? Is that what we're engaged in?
I think that's the hope.
Particular
So,
area?
yeah, we've put forward 2 council liaisons, which is also spelled out. We put up applications to open up for members of the public to be able to apply to be a part of the committee like other committees we've done in the past, and we're hoping that you'd be willing to send 2 folks to participate as well.
Okay. And when are you looking to get this off the ground? Go ahead, Alex.
More logistic questions, like how often do you think this committee will meet? And and what time of day would the committee meet?
Right.
Yeah, so the council has felt strongly that the members of the committee should be the ones to establish that. So we haven't set out a definitive timeline or those questions of when and how often. We wanted to get to the first step of bringing the committee together and then having that group at their first meeting that we convene decide, okay, this is what works well for this group.
Right. Because I think I'm with you. The when and how often is going to be a big deal.
Because for me, how often might not be as bad as the when for me, because if the committee decides that they're going to meet at 3
Afternoons.
that's going to kill me.
Right.
Anything after 5 makes me feel a lot more comfortable, and I will make every effort. But
Right. Should
The same
we?
vote, too.
Well, and I think the other things to think about, the committees that you do have, with negotiations with Mike and Matt, and that's starting in earnest really December. And then your guys' work on the community engagement
Yeah.
which we
committee.
need to really strategize.
then,
I know.
Yeah, and then Alex and Mike are in the capital project, and that's going to also require
gonna take
some
some
board
time.
bandwidth in
Right.
January through May. So, and you may have a new board member, right?
That's
In March.
Well, yeah.
March.
Yeah, we will have
Yeah.
a new.
And it can also fluctuate if you all do decide to move forward with 2 people, but one person has capacity issues that change.
Right,
It can be
right.
moved around. Those
Okay.
spots are open and reserved for you all,
Yeah.
should you want somebody there.
Yeah, that might be a good.
Right, because it could be a
to
rotating
attack it.
position, bringing back the information. Right, we could
Yeah,
do
yeah.
that as well,
Yeah.
as long as it's fed back into the group as to what's going on.
Well, I'm
Because
willing to-
ideally,
I'm
you're
willing to-
going to want 2 people to represent the
Yeah.
board's position, right?
Yeah,
In that committee, not just the 2 people.
Right.
right.
Well, I'm certainly willing to put my, because I'm only on one committee. You now have got 2. You've got,
To
So I'm-
negotiation
yeah.
and capital.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I made a commitment now. I told Sean that I'll make it to every capital planning meeting now.
Okay.
So
And you're
trying
doing
to-
you're doing the
That's actually,
warrants as well, so.
it's not as bad as I thought it would be.
Yeah.
They're probably annoyed with me because I'm like checking almost everything.
So
Hey,
what
good
I,
oversight.
what I might offer here was, again, with negotiations coming,
Mm-hmm.
and the capital.
Let me do, I
information.
don't mind doing this one too, if, as long as the caveat is,
Well, what I was thinking is that, Tori, if you want to be the constant, we can rotate the second seat.
Okay.
And then, you know, have that
Yeah.
discussion
That sounds good.
and make sure that we don't overload any one particular
Yeah.
space.
My guess is that it would have to be, if somebody was appointed, then they could, I don't know how exactly it'd work for stepping on and off, because technically they are members of the committee that are appointed by
Yeah.
the council.
Right.
That might take some tweaking, I don't know.
but,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm willing to step up. I mean, as long as you promise me not to put me on the negotiation committee, next year.
Listen to him, smart guy.
Next year.
He's negotiating already.
Which means eventually you want him on that.
Yeah.
Just kidding.
Well, let me go back to, if we haven't voted on the charter, let me just talk to see if we might be able to craft the language in a way for it to
Two
be
members.
explicit so that it can
I
allow for
would,
that rotating.
I would like to see that only because I know just taking on the extra right now is for me nuts
And I know
but I
that's-
don't mind sharing it and, taking that across. I don't think to the committee itself, I think we're pretty well set with, direction, once we get going, so. I think it would be a consistent, you won't find conflicting views as
Right.
we move in and out. I don't think that'll be the case. So,
Let me
we'll
talk
make
to
a,
Seth.
it'll be a board decision, not a fight,
Yes.
a fight within in between. So, if we can do that, I would certainly share the other section with you. So,
So just for clarity for me, because I want to report back to Jesse this week too.
I'll have 2 reps.
We'll have 2 reps, and for now, we have Tori and Alex. Those will be the names and then there'll be discussion, probably when the committee comes together, about the rotation or,
Right, I would like to have that built in so
If
that
it
we
works
have
for
that
the-
flexibility.
Okay.
I'll have to check,
To both keep it moving and keep a voice in the committee.
Okay.
I'm envisioning only 3 or 4 meetings here. I can't imagine having 8 or 10 between now and March.
I guess I had certainly have in my mind what my ideal timeline and structure would be, but as the council decided, we really got to leave it up to the committee.
Yep, no, I agree on that. Yep. All right,
Great.
good.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. It's great to see y'all.
You
Yeah,
too.
you
You
too.
too. Thanks for your work.
See you too.
Linkage to ownership.
All right.
Oh, I didn't go that far
Then we
enough.
had our board linkage with the ownership 4-4 coming around again. Alex, you had reviewed a piece of this one as well, so thank you for the second round of that. The one thing at least I see in this one is the non-compliance with a 3-year plan. If we had a superintendent with a non-compliance, we'd be all over him. For a plan. For a plan.
right.
And so I guess my question is, how do we begin to attack this one?
To attack the 3-year plan?
Yeah, how do we,
Yeah, that's a great question. Hey, maybe
I mean, you
that
guys
could
have
be
done-
the PD for,
For Val.
yes.
It's a good idea.
Because a 3-year plan is very different from initiating and
Individual
putting into
discussions.
action some community engagement conversations, right? Because
Right.
that could be a part of it, but then we at least have sort of a longer term view of where we're headed. And I think that's a special kind of a
right,
strategic ability to know even what are the possibilities. Like what are some other options? Like what are some other models of 3-year plans, and how does that fit what we're looking,
Right.
how we're looking down the road for
'Cause-
3 years?
Because my bigger concern with this one is when you put a 3-year plan together and you potentially turn 2 board seats over every year, over the course of the 3 years, you've lost it completely. You could potentially lose the base of why are we even doing this? And so that 3-year plan could be the glue to
Yes.
keep,
Yep.
the linkage, succession
Yeah.
to succession piece, so.
Yeah, we do need a 3-year plan. So let's use,
That actually is an awesome idea, I think. That would be the best.
Yeah.
It ties our education, it ties our want to do something
Yes.
additional into policy governance and get Val to take us another step.
and especially if continuing that community has to be a part of all of our problems, as a part of our, what we do
Solution.
here. Yeah,
Yeah.
part of our solutions. We've just got to continue to refine our capacity for that,
Right.
because it's hard.
Yes. And no, I mean, in writing this section, I was writing, going like, I think, I actually don't know who's up for the November newsletter anymore. Like, I think
Me either. I'll get back
The
on
December
this
newsletter.
December newsletter.
I will,
We need to
that.
figure
Get
that
back
out.
on that list.
That could be a
yes.
part of the plan.
That could be part of the plan.
Yeah.
I'm also
I
thinking
think
that,
it's me, actually. I'm pretty sure I'm up.
I'm also thinking part of the plan.
It's due tomorrow.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay. That
because-
means I got a week. Don't tell Ann.
No, we do need to do it because like we didn't have a writer for November.
We
Yeah,
didn't have
that's me getting on
Yeah.
the schedule. I will
But
get
but
that back.
but
in
the other
place.
issue, and when I hear, and I didn't want to, I was hoping that they would at least stay. I was kind of giving the cliffhanger, but the PYC, can we, if we have a 3-year plan, we may be able to better utilize some of these nonprofit groups that are actually collecting the voices, because Tori and I really worked hard on trying to collect voices, and there's a difference between
Yeah.
hiring
Right.
an outside consultant that can bring people. I mean, we can set up the whole research design and have it perfect, but it's a lot of work to try to like recruit people, and if they're already knocking on doors,
Right, that's what I was thinking. I was like,
Right.
wow, we should have tossed a couple questions in your
ask
bag.
them for the questions that we can, and
Yeah.
I'm even willing, if we have money in our little budget, to give a little bit of money to help them out with these things as a good faith of like how we want to have a continue. I mean, I don't know whether money ruins it
Yeah.
on the partnership, but I would really want us to work a little bit more strategically. But it starts off with having a 3-year plan and
It does.
knowing what people do.
Yeah,
Yep.
Because I don't know if I got more energy to go sit at like
the coffee shop.
coffee shop for 3 hours on
3 hours
Saturdays
is-
and have no
yeah.
one come,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
So just food for thought as we're thinking about that one for the upcoming, and again, as we try to, and I think, as I said, if we build a plan that links everything together with Val, I think this will really help us out on that 4 point.
It'd be a
this
nice
one.
little new push.
Yep.
Yeah.
Was there anything else in there that caught your eye
Nothing that caught
as
my
far
eye,
as
no.
things we need to?
No, I had just a little typo stuff, but nothing major.
All right. So I will take out of that then to polish the newsletter schedule again. It should be real easy. We're running into, right at this point, our board meetings and the monthly schedule timing for the newsletter are the same day normally. Right? So I think Sean was
Never
saying
put
it's
that
due
together.
tomorrow for December, and we're talking tonight about
All
a
right.
topic.
Never thought about that. Yeah.
What I might recommend then is that next month, when we have this discussion, we have schedule, so you know who knows what, who's got what coming, and we talk about two topics.
Yes.
And then that'll give a full month for somebody to think about it and write it and be ready for it, rather than always one step behind the 8 ball.
No, I gotta admit, the September was a lot easier because I wrote it with Tori in the summer.
We're doing it back to back.
Right, we did it back to back, and it was like, oh, okay, like, I'll just send it in on time.
So anything else for this particular
That was
one? The discussion, I can touch on the 3-year plan and needing some community engagement with that one. Can touch on the capital project moving along and getting ready to do some community outreach.
Yep.
Just make make sure I take these down. Any other topics? Can go through in full swing with negotiations. I mean, that's quick topics, but nothing.
Budget, which you already have kind of a community engagement piece around budget that you do annually, but
Budget and maybe start inviting people who aren't we supposed to try to find one
Budget
community
buddy.
budget
Oh,
buddy?
yeah, that's
Yeah.
right.
So
That's
we
the
could
other
s-
thing I wanted to mention here is to get somebody, if we can, to come.
To get people to come and say like, hey, we want to hear you. So start inviting them, I guess.
Mhm.
and that.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
so once they go through that, they want to become board members.
right? That's how I got locked in.
And that might be the recruitment speech that you use. So it's all woven. Be a budget buddy, so you can see if you want to be a school board. I mean,
Mhm.
I did get some feedback. I haven't been able to get back in touch with one person who did reach out for me and for more information on the seat that's open.
Nice.
So, but
Okay.
I really want to make sure to keep poking at that one to see if we can get somebody.
which is a topic area that one of the in March one we should do a thank you to Jen for her service.
Yep.
Oh yeah,
We do
yeah,
that.
I'm sure she's watching this, so it won't be a surprise now. But
yeah.
Jen, you're not supposed to delete the last 5 minutes.
Close your ears.
Yeah.
Earmuffs.
Earmuffs.
All right, so, with a path to get our, non-compliance compliant by putting a plan together or figuring out how to develop a plan. I'd accept a motion to accept the policy 4.4 monitoring report.
So moved.
Oh, that's my turn.
It
Any
was,
other
but you were
discussion?
slow.
Won't sleep around here, Tori. will it?
I just
Deadline.
need to note on this
I know,
one.
right?
It
Yes.
says note red means delete. I gotta
Yeah.
forget what the red meant.
Yeah.
And once we delete that, we're
Okay.
good.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
with the
We'll clean it
adjustments
up.
noted.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other discussion? Okay, all those in favor? Aye?
Aye.
Okay.
My first one.
Well done. That was good. That was
All
good
right,
report.
yes, so we do have our budget meetings coming up, parent-teacher conferences shortly, no school next week for the Thanksgiving holiday.
About recent community activities.
Oh, recent community
I know
activities, I
she
did
went
miss
to the
section 8.
VSBA, but I gotta wait till you guys talk about it.
All
I
right.
did. I went.
Yep, that was part of the normal.
Went to this sad soccer game, lost to Virgins. And the walk to school. We did the walk to school. Well, that was last month, wasn't it? But it was
Sacred,
super fun. Oh my gosh.
missed
Man.
that.
Playoffs.
missed that.
Was it
Band
tape
play?
playoffs?
Yeah.
Boys soccer players.
It was fun.
Oh, I'm sad
was
that I
cute.
missed it.
The elementary kids get way into it. The band plays
Band playing,
and
come up the street,
yeah.
police.
Oh,
yeah,
I'm sad that I missed it.
yeah.
All right,
I started mentoring a 8th grader in the school district, and it's been interesting and fun.
oh, nice.
So, did all the police check, I pass.
Good.
So the policies work
Yep.
and stuff.
Cool.
So that'll be my new thing, kind of
Yeah, that's great.
staying
Right.
involved.
That is a very rewarding experience,
Mm-hmm.
for sure. All right, next agenda, any, thing other than what's on the annual? All right. Items as listed, and then we do tonight have, one item for executive session. The second one, has been resolved, so that won't be there, so anything else? Right.
The first one's been resolved.
The first one's been resolved. We're going to executive session for a review of the
second one
negotiations.
resolved. You're amazing.
Nope.
All Mike and Matt.
Yep. All right. So anything else? I would accept a motion to move into executive session.
I was so moved.
All right. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay. We